Good morning, students. Today we will go through with the second chapter of the gastrointestinal disorders. In that, I will discuss something regarding the investigation of the GIT disorders. So basically, these investigations will help us to find out the examination of the luminal contents in particular disorders, and some special tests like upper and lower GI endoscopies. Lower GI endoscopy is also called as colonoscopy, and various laboratory tests which may help in the help in establishing the diagnosis, like some of the secretory tests and some of the organ function tests like liver function tests and pancreatic function tests. Okay, these are the laboratory tests which will help us to find out the diagnosis. So in that, number one is the stool examination. This is a very important and very essential test, especially in case of diarrhea, and those who is having a without abdominal discomfort in cases of diarrhea, and those who is having a long or chronic diarrhea. In these cases also we should go for a stool examination. Okay, it gives information regarding the volume, consistency, and the presence of blood or the mucus in the stool. So especially in some of the bacterial infections which is affecting the gut, like bacillary dysentery, and in inflammatory bowel diseases. Here you can find out some of the RBCs and the pus cells in the stool. Okay, and if you suspecting something like a bacillary dysentery or any bacterial infection, then you should further proceed with the stool culture. Okay, and you can find out some of the parasitic cysts or the ova. I think most of you will be knowing the common intestinal parasites like Enterobius, Giardia lamblia, Ankylostoma, um, Necator, and the Entamoeba. Okay, all these things can be found out through the stool routine microscopy in the ova and cyst. Okay, and one more stool examination, something which is special for the Vibrio cholerae, or to know the motility of the organism or the Vibrio cholerae. We will be doing the hanging drop. Okay, and if you are finding out the fats in the stool, it may suggest patient might be having a malabsorption syndrome. Okay, and in immunocompromised, these are the parasites which we will be finding out in immunocompromised individuals like Cryptosporidium, Microsporidium, Isospora, or the Cyclospora. These organisms can be there. Those immunocompromised will be having a chronic diarrhea. Okay, if this stool examination is having some occult blood, then it indicates GI blood loss, and further investigation must we should proceed with the further evaluation of this patients with other invasive investigations like upper GI endoscopy and other laboratory investigations. Normally the stool will be alkaline. If the pH is less than 6, it suggests carbohydrate malabsorption. And one more important thing in stool examination is the osmotic gap. Normally this is the formula to calculate the osmotic gap. 290 minus 2 multiplied by sodium and with the help of potassium. Okay, this is very useful test which will differentiating from the osmotic diarrhea from the secretory diarrhea. In if this gap is more than 50 milliosmoles per kg, it indicates maybe patient might be having osmotic diarrhea. In secretory diarrhea, it will be less than 50 milliosmoles. Second test is the Second investigation, in if you go through the headings, it will be a gastric acid secretion. Okay, basically in this we can find out whether the patient is having a gastric acid hypersecretion or a decreased secretion or the achlorhydria. Okay, and typically these are used in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome to distinguish from achlorhydria in patients with elevated serum gastrin. And one more test is the basal acid output. These are very rarely used, but if you are having hypersecretion syndromes, then definitely we should proceed with all this tests to confirm the diagnosis. In Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, this basal acid output will be more than 50 millimole. Normally, they mentioned it is less than 5. Okay, lesser than the 5 will be very low levels will be seen in the achlorhydria. So third one is the test for the small intestinal absorption. In that there are different ingredient or the contents are used. One is the xylose. Okay, this will measure the small bowel absorptive capacity of the surface area. This can be evaluated in blood or urine. Like this is in some conditions it may give false positive results also, like in ascites, kidney disorders, or those who is having a very rapid small bowel transit. Okay, in this condition it can give false positive result, so we should be cautious in these conditions. Okay, and another absorption test is the fat. Okay, here we'll be doing the after 3 days we'll be testing the fecal fat, which is little unpleasant for the patient and for the examiner also, but it is a non-invasive test. One more important test is the vitamin B12, also called as the Schilling test. In this we can differentiate through the vitamin B12 administration whether patient is having a gastric disease, ileal disease, or the bacterial overgrowth syndromes. Okay, this vitamin B12 after administration it will be normal in a bacterial overgrowth, whereas in gastric disease this free vitamin B12 absorption will be decreased. Along with vitamin B12 and this B12 and intrinsic factor complex, absorption will be decreased in the ileal diseases. There is one more absorption test is the lactose, here done by the breath hydrogen. This, if the hydrogen levels are very early rise will be there in cases of small bowel bacterial overgrowth. So one more test will be the pancreatic function test. In that pancreatic, endocrine, and exocrine we can divide. In pancreatic exocrine we'll be doing this secretin stimulation test and the fecal chymotrypsin and elastin, and the pancreolaureal test, and other tests are the pancreatic function tests like serum amylase and lipase. Okay, and some other invasive tests also there that I will be telling in the end. So one more very important investigation is the mucosal biopsy. It's done by with the help of forceps. Okay, it should be done under a fluoroscopic guidance, means under a X-ray machine, to know where we are taking a the biopsy site. So it provides definite histological diagnosis of the diseases like esophagus, starting from esophagus till the colon. Especially in identifying the H. pylori, two specimens are required, and after that immediately we'll use a rapid urease kit. In this If it changes from yellow to red, within a few minutes, the diagnosis is confirmed. So, other subheading in investigation is the uh, test for the gastrointestinal motility. This one is the esophageal motility, one is the small intestinal transit, and one more is the colonic transit. So this is kind of a very gold standard test to know the esophageal motility in cases of eclasia cardia and the diffuse esophageal spasm. So here you will tell the patient to swallow the barium bread, and after that you will do a video fluoroscopy, and basically it measures the peristaltic activity of the esophagus or the contraction wave configuration, and you will assess the sphincter pressures after the swallow. So next one is the small intestinal transit. Here the orocecal transit can be estimated by lactulose and the hydrogen breath test, like in small bowel bacterial overgrowth. And basically this lactulose is a non-absorbable disaccharide which reaches the colon intact. Bacterial metabolism of lactulose in the colon produces the hydrogen. Through this we can find out whether abnormality is there or not. Third one is the colonic and the anorectal motility. The total and the segmental colon transit can be measured by a radiopaque marker. Especially this is very useful in cases of chronic constipation. So these are the breath tests which we'll be doing in some of the conditions, like in cases for small bowel bacterial overgrowth, we'll do the lactose and the hydrogen breath test, and this xylose breath test 14C xylose breath test will be doing in the bacterial overgrowth. 14C trivalent breath test will be done in a fat malabsorption, and 14C urea breath test is done to identify whether after the treatment whether H. pylori has been eradicated or not. These are the radioisotope tests. Basically, technetium pertechnetate is the one which we'll be using for gastroparesis and Meckel's diverticulum in obscure bleed. And this 13C urea will be used to identify the eradication of H. pylori. 111 indium labeled leukocytes will be helpful in identifying the distribution or the extent of the disease in inflammatory bowel disease. In some conditions like protein losing enteropathy, we'll be using the 125 indium albumin. So other investigations what we'll be doing in GIT disorders will be in cases of malignancies, like this tumor markers CA19 and 9 in pancreatic and biliary malignancy, and CEA in colonic malignancy, and chromogranin, which is a neuroendocrine tumor in GIT. So upper GI endoscopy, this is the very important investigation in gastroenterology for almost like kind of very essential test for chronic conditions, those who is having a upper GI disorders. So here indications can be divided into diagnostic and therapeutic. These are the diagnostic indications of the endoscopy. Especially this is must in a case of any patient who is having a upper GI bleeding. Either it can be a past bleeding or a current ongoing bleeding. Okay. And those who is having a chronic liver disease like cirrhosis of liver or unexplained splenomegaly, and those who is having a persistent dyspepsia symptoms even without improvement after treatment, those who is having a esophageal reflux symptoms after esophageal reflux symptoms without the improvement with the treatment, those who is having a persistent nausea, vomiting, dysphagia, and odinophagia. And look, when we are looking for a malignancy or those who is having a long-term symptoms of esophageal ulcers or gastric ulcers, and some of the conditions like to identify the familial adenomatosis, polyposis, and some of the gastric polyps in cases of Barrett's esophagus. Okay. And those patients who will be taking like after ingestion of the some of the toxic um, hydrocarbons, those after ingestion of all these components, they can have injury, erosive, corrosive injuries. So these are the therapeutic indications, especially for any bleeding lesions which is occurring in the esophagus, the lower end, upper end, or the lower end, or in the stomach. For therapeutic intervention, we'll be doing a endoscopy and do the some of the procedures like sclerotherapy or banding of the varices. And some foreign body may get obstructed in the esophagus to remove, or in the stomach. So to remove this also, we'll use the endoscopy as a therapeutic thing. And some of the for removal of the some of the lesions like neoplasms, polyps, and placement of the feeding or drainage tubes, and some of the surgeries, and in dilatation of the stenosis in the esophagus, and palliative treatment for the stenosing neoplasm. Okay. And drainage of the pancreatic cirrhosis. So contraindications means like in cases of those who is having a perforated aloviscous perforation, and if the patient is very kind of irritable and is not cooperative, definitely we can't go here. And risks to patient health or the life, which overweighs the most favorable benefit of the procedure. So I'll show you some of the images, like how the upper GI endoscopy images will look like. Here you can make out in the right side the erythematous large esophageal varices. You can make out, which is having a red color. That is the large esophageal varices. The both sides you can make out. And this image you can make out the ulcerated growth in the esophagus. It's protruding. Okay, this is the esophageal cancer. This erythematous with the white base is the gastric ulcer. This is the O-shaped ring after the ligation of the esophageal varices. Is the O ring, we call in O ring. So how we should prepare the patient for the upper GI endoscopy? Okay, usually by putting a local anesthesia to the oral cavity, especially to the pharynx. If the patients are like very apprehensive, you can give the mild sedatives like midazolam and propofol. And this should be performed in a left lateral position. Okay, the tube is we're going to insert through the mouth, and it will, after that it will get into the pharynx, esophagus, stomach, and up to the second part of the duodenum under vision. Like maybe because of the difficulty, if patient is not cooperative, and if the anatomical part is not that good, and if it is very fragile, sometimes it can get perforated. So, and because of that, patient can land up in a bleeding, and some patients can go for in shock also. Okay. And And some patients who is having lax, and there will be having pulmonary complications like aspiration, and because of, if it all the gastric fluid gets aspirated, leading to aspiration pneumonia and decrease after that they will be having a decreased saturation, and they can land up in secondary bacterial infections. Okay. And maybe because of the um, pre-medication which we give before the procedure, for that also some patients may land up in arrhythmias, and some of the atrial and ventricular arrhythmias. Okay. And this is very rare, the risk of transmission of this whatever mentioned hepatitis B, C, and means if you're not sterilizing the instruments properly, but and contaminated with H. pylori and Pseudomonas salmonella. Even if you're not sterilizing the instruments properly, there is a risk of transmission. So one more important investigation is the colonoscopy, which will be looking to find out the abnormalities in the lower GI tract. Here also, the indications can be divided into diagnostic and therapeutic. As so basically, we'll be doing unexplained lower GI symptoms like constipation, incomplete evacuation, and lower GI bleeding, the rectal bleeding, and the lower GI X-rays, which you are not finding out any significant diagnosis, and polyps in the lower GI tract, and screening for the screening in the elderly to rule out any carcinomas, inflammatory bowel disease, any stricture or the narrowing, and diverticular disease, and some of the if some patients are receiving radiation for some other carcinomas, they may land up in radiation colitis or infectious colitis, and in ischemic colitis also we should do. And this endometriosis can also spread to the colon. In these scales also you should check the colon involvement. So these are the therapeutic indications, like to remove any polyps in the lower GI tract, any foreign bodies, and dilatation of the strictures. Okay, in cases of some of the Crohn's, and if there is a bleeding, to maintain hemostasis, you can go through the colonoscopy, and some of the palliative carcinoma resections, and colon decompressions in volvulus, and placement of stents in a non-resectable malignant obstruction. This image you can make out some mass is coming out at around 3 to 4 o'clock position. Yeah, this is it's a rectum image. The mass is protruding. It's a nodular mass, which suggests rectal carcinoma. In this you can make out some of the ulcers at 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock positions. This is very good colonoscopic image showing a ulcerative colitis. Okay. So in this you can make out multiple polyps. Okay. So here to assess the or to identify the anatomical location and any pathology, it's clean colon is must, otherwise it's very difficult because it will be mixed up with the stool. So for evacuating, we'll be using all this all these agents: polyethylene glycol, sodium picosulfide. Okay. So before giving all these ingredients of the things, you should make sure that patient is not going for perforation or the obstruction. Okay. And here also, if patient is very kind of irritable, you can use some of the sedatives or the analgesics like midazolam. So these are the some of the complications, contraindications which we should not do colonoscopy, like any acute infection or the inflammation in cases of ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. And if patient is already having a peritonitis, um, if you're suspecting patient might be in a perforation, mm, then you should not proceed. Okay, in the second and third trimester of pregnancy, you should not go for colonoscopy. And, obviously, in uncooperative patient, you can't do. Um, and in recent myocardial infarctions, when patients is in impending shock, and if they are having a large aortic aneurysm, okay, and recent pelvic or the colorectal surgery. So these are the complications you can expect, um, like secondary infections and drugs related complications, bacteremia. Sometimes it may get perforated, and because of that it may develop in a hemorrhage. Okay, and this is one post-op distension will be there for some patients after the procedure. Okay, and maybe this cardiac and cardiographic abnormalities means the conduction abnormality can be there in because of the drugs also. This is the one more invasive test which we'll be doing to identify the biliary and pancreatic ductal system. This is called as the endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography. Okay, but here we will be injecting some of the radio opaque contrast. Okay, and after endoscopy, cannulation of the duodenal papilla. And these are the indications where we'll be doing the ERCP. In cases of surgical jaundice or any cyst in the common bile duct, any infection of the cholangeal system, and suspected sclerosing cholangitis, or any periampullary carcinomas, or biliary pancreatitis, or recurrent acute pancreatitis or chronic pancreatitis, to know the evaluation of the pseudocysts of the pancreas, any fistulas, and sometimes you may aspirate the pancreatic fluid also for the study. And in these conditions, we'll be going through the ERCP. Okay, and these are the therapeutic indications where, like drainage of any infection, and in cases of post-operative bile leak, if you're doing any surgery which is involving the pancreas, duodenum, and the gallbladder, if there is a leak also, then you will go with ERCP procedures. And in extraction of the stones in the CBD duct, or in the or some worms also, or identity cyst also can get obstructed in that area. To remove this, you can go with the ERCP. And in some cases of a stricture of the bile duct, you can go with this procedure and dilate the stricture of the duct. And sometimes stone can get obstructed in the pancreatic duct. To remove, and later patient can have a calcific pancreatitis, ultimately leading to patient might develop a symptoms of diabetes. In this also can remove the stone through this procedure. Okay, and stricture dilatation, and pancreatic duct stenting. Some patients will have a chronic severe pain in cases of chronic pancreatitis. There you can suspect maybe that might be getting obstructed. To like secure that, you can go and dilate the duct. So these are the complications in ERCP. Basically, because this is under the fluoroscopic guidance, one is the definitely patient will get exposed to the fluoroscopy, means X-ray guidance. get exposed to the x-rays. So sometimes with the procedure, while going through the after the duodenum, sometimes it can perforation can occur. Maybe with the procedure also, sometimes patients will end up in pancreatitis, post procedure pancreatitis. And definitely if it is getting perforated, sometimes will end up in a hemorrhage. And because you'll be using some of the dyes here, so the contrast dyes, some patient can have a allergy towards it. And if it is, we are not using the proper methods, and um, pre-procedure not maintained with the sepsis, then can land up in a pancreatic sepsis. And sometimes it can induce spleen also. Okay, so these are the highlights of the investigations which we will be using um, in gastrointestinal disorders. Along with that, so many blood tests are there that we can discuss in individual disorders, like which and all the blood tests can be used. For example, some of the acid and basis analysis, and pancreatic function tests like serum amylase and serum lipase, and other blood tests also to identify the um, infections, and to identify the um, liver function tests also, like bilirubin and albumin, globulin, and some of the liver enzymes. All those things we can discuss in individual diseases. Thank you.